Have you ever made a sale in FM that at best could be described as a stripy jumper job? Because that is exactly what we've done this season. It's that time again where, remarkably, I get to tell you that over on stream right now, we have 2 Hungarian sides in European finals. So, of course, after you've watched this, drop on over there and get dropped straight into the action. The VODs of all the streams can, of course, be found over on the second channel, which is linked in the description. They go out the day after each of the streams. But for now, Season 19 of Building a Nation with MTK Budapest was supposed to be the calm after the storm. After last season getting a ridiculous 25.9 coefficient points and shooting our way all the way up to second in the coefficient rankings, this one was supposed to be one about stability, but more importantly, given that we were still only going to have 6 teams in Europe this season, with a lot of them being in the lower competitions, it was a great opportunity for us to maximize our points this year and close the gap to England, well, as much as we physically can. Also, today we'll be having a little look at the Hungarian national team, as well as some of the attribute progression of some of our more long-standing players, because I know that's often highly requested. So this might be a slightly longer one than usual, but hopefully you guys will find it worth it. But for now, let's talk transfers, as this year it's mostly been about us stockpiling talent for the other sides in Hungary, as well as trying to pinpoint a few little signings to strengthen our first team. And that and pulling off probably the muggery of the century, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Oh, and if you're a fan of funny regen names, then today, my friends, you are in for a treat. I mean, I just slapped that mic about, so if this mic has like a discipline kink, then it's all over that. Oh. Sorry, I let the intrusive thoughts win. The first out was Bakary Diop to Milan for £32 million. Now, last season, we brought him in and ended up loaning him to Porto midway through the year. They did have an option to buy for £28 million, but in the end, they turned that down. And then somehow, Milan thought, yeah, that seems like a great deal for us, and they spent £32 million on bringing him to the club. And it's worth noting that he joined us at the start of last season for free. So not a bad piece of business, really, and I'm just loving this system of us bringing in these guys who are 28 to 30 and then flipping them in a year and a half or so for quite large money. Another £32 million made on that, obviously minus signing on fees and a little bit of his wages, but still, that's one of our better attempts. But that's not really the issue here. The biggest issue is the muggery that I was talking about. So you may remember last year, we actually shelled out our record transfer fee in the save, which is kind of strange to even talk about, on Dylan Chambers of Celtic for £35 million. And we're a little bit disappointed with the player we got. Not because his attributes weren't good, just that we were a little bit disappointed that maybe he might not have the sell-on value that we thought he could potentially do, and he just wasn't getting a lot of games for us. So this year, we thought we'd try and pull the wool over someone else's eyes and ship him on. That is exactly what happened. So here is he, now playing, of course, for Manchester United, or should I say not playing for Manchester United, which actually kind of makes this better in a way, because that can't be going particularly well for him. Now, ignore the star ratings on here, because this is a weird one, because we have a coach that does a lot of our star ratings when the players are at the club, and obviously the scouts handle it when players are not at the club. They have the same judging PA and CA. We like that kind of, stability across the board. When he's at us, he's a 3-star player, but the moment he leaves and he was at Celtic or United, suddenly he becomes really good according to that, which just does show you that there's a lot of disparities and stuff like that. So don't always trust the stars, look at the attributes. But that is not the point. And I decided that we maybe should try to look to move Dylan on in the January transfer window, as he wasn't playing a great deal of football for us, and we felt that with him being English, there was a great opportunity to hopefully move him on to an English side for quite large money, because that's always how it works in FM. And luckily, we were in a situation where Liverpool, City, and United were all interested in him. He wanted to go to Liverpool the most, and originally Liverpool put a bid in of £20 million. We thought, you know what, that's less than we paid, but we just kind of want to get him off the books at this point. But we managed to leverage that, and they just kept bidding and bidding and bidding, and I could not believe my eyes, because you'll look at that and say, oh, £60 million, that's not a bad business to nearly double your money on him in a single season. That's true, but that isn't entirely why it's the biggest muggery of the century. One of the reasons is the fact that they've not even played this dude since he joined them in January. He's not played a single minute for them in the second half of the season. So great, well done there, United. Not the first time they've done that with one of our players. You remember Tex-Mex from a few seasons ago. He's been at United for 3 years now, and that's exactly how many appearances he has for them. 3. I might even try to get him back, honestly, poor sod. Point being, though, when the bids all came in, I decided to try and be sneaky on Manchester United's last bid, and I said, you know what, if you give me £60 million and a 50% of next sale fee clause, he's yours. He's yours, and I'll get rid of the other bids, because I didn't think we were going to get much more. And remarkably, they actually went for it. Now, obviously, in his current state, he's not likely to be sold by Manchester United anytime soon, although he does have quite a long contract, so there is an opportunity for him to potentially move and we'd get some money. But that's not the reason we put these clauses in. The reason we do it is because very often teams will buy that clause off of you so they then don't have to pay. And usually that number that they'll pay you is worked out as roughly 50% of the low end of their current value. And you might notice it, obviously it's got a line through it at the moment, but when he moved to them initially, his value was £240 million. Not that I'm saying we'd get that, but I think there's a very strong chance at some point in the next few years, either he will leave, still on relatively large money because of who he is in the first place, and we'll get a nice chunk of that, which could possibly take it to over £100 million, even if it's only 40 million that we'd get out of the deal, which isn't too bad when you think about it. But more important than that, they could potentially end up selling this clause to us. I've sold clauses in the past for moon money, and I reckon still there's an opportunity for us to sell that clause for over £50 million. And that would be a lot of free money for a player that we didn't really want in the first place. So we're, needless to say, very happy with that. But that was really the only other major out that we made, along with a couple of sort of, million here, million there signings. But that's not really the point. Let's move on to the players that have come in so we can get to some of the fancy dans. First up, Joaquin Silva, £3.6 million from Nacional. He's 5-star potential. He's on loan at Molfehevar this season. Only got 6 goals, but he's definitely getting there, and he's still only 19 years old. Then, honestly, one of the best signings we've made in years in terms of the value. This is Carlos Molina, 18-year-old Ecuadorian centre-back / left-back, sorry, right-back rather. Still not sure exactly what we want to do with him here. On loan at Girmont this season, £120,000. That is an insane deal for us. Now, full disclosure, I actually found this guy with a recruitment focus. I know, me in a recruitment focus. The hell has finally frozen over. As I've been running like a South American wonder kid recruitment focus for the last 3 years, and I'll be honest with you, he is the only player that's worth, and no, don't get me wrong, he's fantastic, but point being, it has brought us a grand total of 5 players over the last 3 years, and only one of them was actually any good. And that's why I just don't really trust recruitment focuses for the most part, and I feel like the other scouting methods we use are just so much more efficient. But what I will say is, they did find this dude, so I can't really complain, and it almost makes up for it. What a guy. Oh, and then it gets better. We've made some genuine bargains buys this year. This is Devoy Atherton, a Jamaican international goalkeeper on loan at Budapest Honvéd, who we signed from Humble Lion. He genned at a Jamaican team. He is absolutely outrageous, and for £83,000, what a deal. Now, the way we found this one is a bit of a strange one. So a lot of you will have noticed that Liverpool, or I think it was Liverpool at the time, had a player in this save called Phil Neville, which is just kind of funny. So that got us thinking about what Phil Neville, the actual Phil Neville in real life, was up to. And this is where this went. Turns out what Phil Neville's up to is managing the Jamaican national team, which led to a whole host of memes. But while we were there, we just randomly looked in the national team and found that dude. And what a story that was. What a player he is. Next up was Christos Nakash, who a player that we actually signed from a Hungarian side in Kecsmet. The main reason for that, though, was so that they don't end up selling him to someone else. So we've paid £8.5 million to essentially keep him there. The deal came with a 2-year loan, and the idea is we'll just keep extending it like we did with Puskás back in the day. So that's the plan with him. Very interesting player, though, and it shows that these kind of guys can come through at Hungarian sides. Just not at our side, basically. He was 5-star potential, but you know how these things can go. Still an excellent player, and the fact that he's Greek is just kind of cool. But now another signing I'm very pleased with, Pablo Zurita, £4.7 million, now on loan at Zalaegerszeg, but is another 5-star potential dude. And the fact that we're still able to find these guys, even with the level of squad that we have, is great. And it really does feel like we're just hoovering up a lot of the world's best talent now, which also prevents those types of players from moving to the other major European sides, and means that we can funnel these guys into the loan system in Hungary and really just strengthen the whole league. And I think that's potentially what could push us over the edge later down the line in this save. Same kind of thing applies for Eric Pinder, a Mexican international centre-back, £5.5 million from Atlas Guadalajara. He's still worth loads of money, but the reason I liked him as well isn't just this stuff here. It's the fact that he actually hits the marks for me in terms of great tackling, marking, heading. Positioning is solid as well. 17 jumping reach. He's not the slowest. He's considered a wonder kid. I love this dude. Then on the other end of the spectrum, disappointment. Juan Roman Blanco, £10 million I paid for him. Just a massive waste of money. We were promised better potential. Just didn't work out that way. You know, you win some, you lose some. And a similar-ish kind of story applies to Martin Koda, although I still think that he has got mad potential as well. £4.9 million from Bohemian Prague over in the Czech Republic. But again, he's another one of these players that I just really like the actual attributes he had. And I figure that even if he maybe doesn't have the highest PA ceiling, he's a fantastic loan farmer. He ticks all the boxes that I want. He's got great jumping reach as well. I think he's a really solid centre-back. But now, on to one of my favourite signings because it was free, and some funny names, because that's what you're here for, right? You just like the funny names. But first up, the freebie. This is Kenny Baumeister. Cost us nothing. Obviously, there is a signing on bonus that he would have got for joining us, but I think it was only like £7 million, which in the grand scheme of things is pretty good. Now, he was released by PSG at the end of last season. Now, he is also 31, but even so, look at the state of him. On 100k a week, now the idea was we didn't want to break our wage structure. Originally, he wanted 170, so we've got him on 100k a week with some clauses and bonuses that would bump his wage up quite a lot, effectively, but without actually increasing his wage, because we didn't want other players being like, well, he's on 170k a week. Why am I, your third choice right back, also not on 170k a week? Wage structure is very important here. Right, now to funny names, because if you're like me, it's just fun to find regens with interesting names in FM, and I like to sign them because that's fun for me, particularly at this stage in the save where we've got a meme budget every year of about £5 million that we can drop on these types of players. So the first one I'm going to introduce through a Twitch clip because it's just more funny that way. What do you want on your toast? Never jam. That is... that right there is one of the best names I've ever seen. It's so good. Worst DJ name ever. Never Jam. Just so there's no confusion, that is actually his name, Never Jam. It's a beautiful name. Wonderful. Love it. And the last one is just a very strange but brilliant name. This, my friends, is Nick Jonas Passage. Now, obviously, there is a nickname involved here because I added the apostrophe there just because we're children. But that is his actual name, Nick Jonas Passage. And it just... it's one of those names that on its own isn't particularly interesting, but it just works. And I'm just a huge fan of Nick Jonas Passage. What can I say? But that actually wraps up the signings this year. You can see that it is mostly stuff for the loan farm in there too. And then a couple of like pinpointed signings for the first team. But for the most part, our team is just stacked right now. We didn't really need that many additions and we didn't want to spend too much money on them. And there's just no doubt about it. It is the tightest league we've had probably in this entire save, probably since we won our first league title. We only won the league by 6 points this year over Kisvada, of all people, actually coming second. But obviously only 2 points clear in front of Halash as well, who've had other things to deal with, I suppose. And I think what this really shows is that the strength of the league is firstly just massively improving. The other teams are just better now because they've got much better players, and obviously all the players we loan to them can play against us, which doesn't help. And it means no longer can I rotate the entire first team squad out before a Champions League game. I mean, I still do it, but we then very often lose those matches. I would say that almost all of these draws and defeats that we've got this season came directly before a Champions League game, with the idea of resting players out so they can play in midweek. Joining us in the top flight next year, most likely, well, Mezhkovez definitely, and then it's either Zhuri or Pushkas, who just need to get their act together. But now it's time to talk about Europe. And we started off with a Super Cup defeat. Again, this time to Haladash, who of course won the Europa League last season, and I'm kind of glad. It was a slightly rotated side for us in this game as well because of reasons. And also, I wasn't super asked if we lost this match, particularly as given that they won this, they actually got a reputation bump, which may have helped them get some extra players in. And I think that's quite important to do. But now the actual Champions League this season. Started off with a very poor result. Patrice gave us the lead away at PSV Eindhoven, but Tim de Kock got them an equaliser after a defensive error. It was their only shot on target of the match, but that's just how these things go. Disappointing as hell because they're one of the weaker sides in the Champions League at this point. And unfortunately, this result weirdly has got massive implications much later down the line, but not for us. Talk about that when we get to it though. We bounced straight back though. 2 goals from Ingram, 1 from Patrice, putting Valencia back where they belong, which is, I guess, lower down in the Champions League. Then really showed our class, going away to PSG, Silva, Carpenu, and the newly returned Blaz Jurin back from his loan spell at Ferencváros. He refused to go back out, and we had no choice but to put him in our first team this season, particularly as Bobby broke his leg. And that meant that he missed the entire first half of the season, so Blaz just went from being a loanee to suddenly being our starting striker in the Champions League. A risk, you'll admit. Not that it felt like much of a risk, as he then went and scored 5 goals away at Red Bull Salzburg. Michael Hansen actually got a couple for them there, but Blaz was just unplayable. Ridiculous. Silva with an assist as well. And then it got even better, as we humped Liverpool by 4 goals to 1, as Blaz then scored another 4. So we got 1 in his first game, 5 in his second, and then 4 in his third game. He'd already got 10 goals in the Champions League in 3 appearances. Now, I must admit, again, they did score their only shot on target, but that's just how it goes. We were massively, like 4-1 is so harsh on Liverpool in this game. Blaz just took his chances. He was in these positions and he was just firing off goal after goal from every angle. He's world-class talent and he's just become our main striker now because this seems to happen every couple of years. But then we dropped points again. Spurs actually took the lead in this one after we missed a penalty. Thomas Velasquez should not have taken this. I don't know why it assigned it to him, considering there were other players on the pitch, but there you go. Bobby did get us the equaliser in this one in his return to the team. So he's actually back by December there, but that was his first appearance for us this season, and what an appearance it was. But then we always get these games after Christmas against some of the weaker sides. 3-0 against Eintracht Frankfurt, Bobby, Shogos, and of course Kenny Baumeister with the goals. And that was then followed with an even easier result against Braga. A 2-1 for Bobby, 1 for Carpenu. Blaz grabbed one off the bench in this game, I believe, and Kenny grabbed another one. And all that, though, did allow us to win the Champions League group, despite those 2 draws. Unusual that we were actually able to win this with only 20 points in the end, but 27 goals scored, 6 conceded, plus 21 goal difference, and it did require goal difference in the end, because obviously we didn't play against Bayern, so there was no head-to-head there. The goal difference won out, and we managed to win the Champions League, which was really, really good to be in that position. And since we're in this position, we might as well talk about the other Hungarian sides that are up to this point as well. So we had Debrecen and Haladash, and unfortunately it did not go so well for Debrecen. Just the 4 points on the board. They did get a victory against Trabzonspor. They got themselves a draw against Porto, but unfortunately the main problems for them was the defeat defeats against Malmö and Olympiacos away from home. They needed to do better than that, basically. But that's not the real disappointment. The biggest disappointment was Haladáš. As you'll see that they managed to get 8 points, which isn't always quite enough, but sometimes is enough for the top 24. They got 2 results, Lyon and Boda with good wins there, draws against Stade Rennais, and of course a draw against Arsenal as well. But the biggest disappointment for me was the defeat to FC Copenhagen. That's the one for me that they had to be doing better than that and needed to get that point. But that's not actually the reason that they didn't go through. You'll know that PSV Eindhoven here ended up on 9 points. Now, they did this with a late goal against Bayer Leverkusen on the final match day. However, the only reason they were on 8 points to begin with is because they got that ridiculous point against us in match day 1. And if they hadn't have done that, Haladáš would have qualified in 24th place. So us failing to beat PSV in that first match day has indirectly cost Haladáš a place in the next round, and obviously with that, an opportunity to get extra coefficient points. It wasn't a great day. So sadly, that was the end of the story for both Debrecen and Haladáš, but of course it wasn't the end of the story for us, as we got to bypass a round, but unfortunately, we got the toughest possible opposition in the next round, 9th place Liverpool, because that just seems to be how it goes. That being said, we had beaten them 4-1 in the group stage. We played the Fortress away from home and got the result. Ingram against his former side, Miggy with a lovely header from a corner. I think that 2-0 is a little bit harsh, but we were definitely the better side, and we were just able to play with this sort of counter-attacking football in this one. Blas was still the man of the match in this game, though, which was really, really nice to see, and gave us a great lead to take back home. Where we then played a decent amount better, and Blas was able to grab ourselves a lovely goal late on in this one to give it a 1-0 victory, 3-0 on aggregate. Also, David O'Neill, who was an under-21 player that was thrown into the team late in this one against Liverpool, was sent off in the 95th minute for elbowing Blas in the face. Like, you actually saw the animation. He cleaned him out with his elbow, and Blas was just like, well, dead, basically. Rip. But that, of course, propelled us through to the next round of the Champions League, where we were drawn against PSG, another side that we'd already beaten in the Champions League this season, and away from home as well. And this is where things take a turn for the, I have no idea what's going on. We beat PSG 8-1. 8-1 in Budapest. Kenny grabbed a brace. Blas grabbed another 4 goals. That's, I think, took his total to 15 goals in the Champions League this season. Jose Luis Castillo, our former player, still managed to find time to grab a goal for himself. Patrice and Silva grabbing goals in this game as well. And honestly, my brain was broken by this result, so much so that the analogies just became utterly wild. Like, we have quite literally peeled open their cheeks and spat into their arse. That's how this game has gone. Needless to say, we were in good shape to get through to the next round, as we still went away to PSG and won 3-0. 11-1 on aggregate. Ingram, Silva and Baumeister with the early goals. And you'll note that we were 11-1 up in this game on aggregate after 25 minutes of the second leg, and then just kind of went, you know what? We'll let them have this. 11's probably enough for us. And that then set up a semi-final draw against Barcelona. And you can really see now that we really are a team that can be competing at the top end of the Champions League every season now. The consistency is wild. But it wasn't a great result. A 90th minute goal from Erkan Öztürk, the former Bayern striker, was enough to sink us. And unfortunately, 2 injuries in this game really did not help. And we ended up finishing with 10 men because we got an injury. I thought now's a good time to make a load of subs. And then we got another injury straight afterwards. We were unable to deal with it. We were already down a few players in this game as well. But with Teixeira and Yaman going off, we were really, really light, and it did cost us. The goal was a little bit silly, but the defender just missed the ball. It happens, but they were definitely the deserved winners, but it's frustrating, man. But I always felt like at home we could be better, and that's exactly what we went and did. 4-1 in the home game. It took extra time, though, is what I will say. It did take extra time. Blas grabbed another one, Silva in there too. Guillermo Navarro, our former player, grabbed an equaliser on the tie for them there, but in extra time, Bobby Tree, love to see that for him, and then Blas grabbed another one to wrap up the tie, and on momentum, I would say that we definitely deserved the result in the end. We were definitely the better side, and that puts us into yet another Champions League final, back-to-back Champions League finals this time, and we will face Bayern Munich in the final. So I'm fairly content that there's a chance that we can get back-to-back Champions Leagues, and we bloody well need to, but this team is just on fire at the moment, and Blas has 18 goals in the Champions League. The only MTK player that scored more goals than him in a single season in the Champions League was Bobby 2 seasons ago when he got 19. Who's getting a number? Is it Mr... Oh, it's old... Chat, Dick Sucks is getting his number. Aw, good for him. I can't pretend that's not appropriate. But obviously that's just our path. We know that Haladáš and Debrecen are out, but we still have 3 other sides in the Conference League and the Europa League. So let's turn our attention to those. League phase of the Europa League was always going to be a very tough one, as our only representative this year was Kisvada. That said, they did get to the semi-finals last year and only were knocked out by the eventual winners, Haladáš, which is not a bad result for them. But it did take a bit of last-minute heroics for them to even qualify for the knockouts this time around, coming 23rd. Only the 1 victory, which was against Villarreal. The 6 draws really were what did it for them, including away at Leicester, and good results for against a lot of sides. The only team that actually beat them was Sevilla, who of course came 2nd in the group. So not a bad result for them, but also noticed Man City in the Europa League this year. That's how far they've fallen. Actually lost to Midtjylland in the group stage. All this earned Kisvada a draw against Shakhtar, which in the first leg we weren't particularly sure, basically. They took the lead early on, but a 1-1 in the end is not great at home. But one thing Kisvada did show us in last year's Europa League was their ability to come from behind, especially away from home. Usually with these Hungarian sides, they tend to do a lot better at home, but Kisvárda are just away specialists. And they proved it yet again, getting a 2-2 draw in Ukraine and winning it on penalties in the end to move through to the next round, which is pretty impressive. And we were like, you know what? You've done your best. That's fantastic. And then they drew Fiorentina. And again, a 0-0 draw at home. And they just can't seem to get themselves through. But you'll note Midtjylland there with a 1-1 against Leicester City as well. They're doing really, really well. They're actually our affiliate side as well, which is kind of fun. But then, yet again, in the second leg, they pulled it off. They took it to extra time, and Christopher Owono, our forward player, put them through with yet another away win in Europe to put them into the Europa League quarterfinals. So they've been to the semis last year and the quarters this year, which is outrageous. And you'll note that Midtjylland, with a 2-0 victory at home, beat Leicester City. That's remarkable as well. City only beating Cluj 3-1 as well. And that then set up a tie between Midtjylland and Kisvárda. And then this happened. 2-1 away from home in Denmark. Merle and Bohats. Our former player, of course, in Antoine Merle, who's now the captain at Kisvárda and is killing it there. And obviously our Loney doing the business. So they were capable of beating a side away from home that beat Manchester City and knocked out Leicester, which was remarkable. And then it got even better. In the second leg, 5-0 victory. 7-1 on aggregate against Midtjylland. What on earth? Absolute scenes there as they pushed to their second consecutive Europa League semi-final, just absolutely clapping a team that had clearly been showing real quality. But they then would face in the semi-finals perennial Europa League specialists, Sevilla, who had already beaten them in the group stage. And then it didn't go so well. A 2-0 defeat in Spain. Vinalia with that late 93rd minute goal. We just thought that maybe if they could have not conceded that, there would have been a chance in the second leg, but those 2-0 leads are just so tough to overcome. Unless you're Kisvárda, who are apparently absolutely unstoppable. A 4-1 victory, this time in extra time again. Zoltan, our former player, 2 more goals from Antoine Merle, and that goal from Edwin Suto in, well, which I'm guessing was extra time, was enough to send Kisvárda to a Europa League final. They've got to the semis last year, only lost to a Hungarian side, and now they'll be in the final. That's ridiculous. And never before in any of these Building a Nation saves have I ever had, aside from the league I'm managing in, reach a Europa League final. Last year, Haladash won it, and now Kisvárda are in a final this year. Now, they will play Manchester City. It's going to be crazy tough, but the only thing I'll say is this. They can still do this. They beat Midtjylland 7-1. A Midtjylland side that knocked out Leicester in the knockouts and beat Manchester City in the group stage. I think Kisvárda might have a bit about them, honestly. I mean, they've clearly shown that. They could beat a team like Sevilla. I think they could give Manchester City a go in the Europa League final, and that's the first thing we're going to be doing over on stream right now. So now, finally, to the Europa Conference League, where we had Újpest and Ferencváros. And I guess you could say it went quite well. Újpest with 6 wins out of 6 only didn't win the damn thing because of their goal difference. Just the 1 goal conceded. They really have killed it. It's nice to have them back in Europe this year. Ferencváros weren't quite as good. A couple of defeats in there to Lech Poznan, weirdly, who are a decent side still, but remarkably, I thought they would have done better at home, and Real Betis end up coming 9th in the end with 12 points, but still, that gave them an extra round and grabbed some extra coefficient, hopefully. And they drew Apoel of Cyprus, and that's exactly what they went and did. A 2-1 victory away from home, Fabrizio and Aruda doing the business. In the home game, they killed the Tav with Fabrizio and Uzelac putting them through to the next round. 4-1 victory into the second knockout round of the Europa Conference League, and their opponents would be Újpest. God damn it. They would face off in an all-Hungarian tie. It's the last thing we needed. I don't mind that later in the tournament as it guarantees us progression, but we didn't need that at this round because I felt that whoever they got, they were both more than capable of qualifying through. So the fact that they had to play each other was a really annoying hindrance. And then they went and beat Újpest 2-0 in the home game with Puskás and a goal from Michel Bell, an own goal that is. And in the second leg, it just wasn't enough. That red card for Hossam Hosseini wasn't enough as Bell scored at the right end this time, but Fabrizio's goal was enough to send Ferencváros, interestingly, through to the quarterfinals. Now, of course, they were in the final of the Conference League last year, sadly lost out to Spurs, but no Spurs in it this year. Newcastle probably the biggest threat, I would say, at this stage. They then drew Sturm Graz, a 1-0 victory away from home, sent them cruising through, but note, Hajduk Split 1-0 against Newcastle. Second leg, very simple for Ferencváros, sailing through. It took Newcastle extra time to beat Hajduk Split. Interestingly, they've actually got a guy called Vincent Day here, who I'm fairly certain is the same exact name, it must be a face in the game, of the goalkeeper that was at Spurs in my Ireland video that came out 2 days ago. Thank you for the support on that. That was mad, by the way. But that unfortunately set up a tie in the semis between Ferencváros and Newcastle, and they couldn't quite get through that home leg. Puskás got a goal, but Mading and Brock gave them the win, and in the second leg, they just weren't quite good enough. A 2-0 victory for Newcastle. Moore and Brock with the goal sent them through to the final, where it will be Newcastle versus Vitória de Guimarães. We kind of need the Portuguese lads to do us a favour, but not quite. Ferencváros, though, yet again, semi-final of the Conference League. We really do have teams that can go deep into these tournaments every single year now. Like, we've got 2 more finals this year, and we had a semi-final in the Conference League. I'll tell you what, I'm going to put a bounty out on the first Hungarian side that can finally win this damn competition. It's mad that we've not won it so far after 6 attempts, but that's life, right? And all that for the coefficient up to this point. Obviously, there's still a potential for some extra. Actually only puts us on 19.1 this year, despite having 2 sides in the finals. The main sort of drawback was the lack of success that Kisvárda had in the group stage of the Europa, and also just Debrecen letting the side down massively. Újpest not going as as far as perhaps they could have done. So that's really did cost us. Still, a really good year for us. And I still think that with the right results, we could end up over 20 points, but it's not going to be quite like the seasons of old or seasons of last year. So it looks very likely that we are going to slip down to third after this season. But still, there's a massive gap, though, between third and fourth, and out of that, we're in no danger of dropping out of those anytime soon. But now, to the Hungarian national team. Some of you said you wanted to see it. There's not really much to update you on, and the main reason I haven't bothered to show it very often is because, well, we're not managing the national team. This save isn't about how the national team succeeds. But what you will notice, though, is the sheer amount of second nationality players in the team. And the reason for that, of course, is because we bring so many players in. After a while, if they don't get national team caps for their nations, because there's so many of them in the country, they often end up declaring for Hungary. Most notable from the, I believe it's 6 Brazilians that are currently in their national team. Some of whom we've actually changed their names to make them sound a little bit more Hungarian. Some of whom we haven't. I think most of those guys have probably aged out of the squad now. But yeah, it's a good team that they've got there. Not a lot of youngsters coming through, honestly, but most of these players have either played for us or used to play for us. I think almost all of them, in fact. I'm trying to find a couple that haven't. Otto Elek hasn't, and obviously Tamas Konch, the goalkeeper for PSV, ironically, who is a ridiculously good goalkeeper, but has always been too expensive for us to sign. Although, that being said, he's come down in price a lot now. I wonder if we could sneak in there, actually, on him. But yeah, that's how the Hungarian side, the national team's looking. They're down in 70th in the world rankings. Despite all these extra players they're bringing in, they're just doing nothing with it, and it's a real shame. Andras Puskás as well as the captain. Now, to the team stats. So this year, top goal scorer is Blaz, by a considerable margin. 43 goals this year, in only 27 starts as well. And he's massively overperformed his XG too, which is a really good sign of just like the quality that this guy has. 11 assists, 54 goal contributions this year in 42 appearances is a staggeringly good amount, and I'm really, really impressed with him. But also, Sam Ingram, 26 goals Ingram's banged for us this year. He had 22, I think it was, before Christmas. He was the top scorer for most of the first half of this season, then just sort of fell away a little bit. He was just on a different wavelength to everybody else. 12 assists as well, 38 goal contributions for him. But Silva, even like, how was he now, 32, he's still killing it. You know, 18 assists this year, 31 goal contributions in all competitions. He's just a god. You'll also note that Bobby is missing here. It's not because he's not here, it's just that he's injured at the moment. He has got 18 for us this year in 1,700 minutes, so he's still played a decent amount of football and has just not been able to quite reach the levels that Blaz has. And that's why Blaz has often been preferred to Bobby in a lot of these games. And with Bobby's injury, Blaz will be starting the Champions League final. There's no doubt about it. And Kenny Baumeister, what can I even say? 24 assists, 12 goals, 36 goal contributions in 36 games. If a game happens, the chances are he's probably going to get a goal or an assist in it, and that's how good he's been this year. What an absolute god. Even Patrice has finally hit double digits for once, which is just kind of nice too. Mihal's fallen down the pecking order a little bit this year, but he's still a fantastic player. It's just a good batch of players. But what I wanted to show you now, since we're doing this today, is to just look at the attribute progression of some of our longer standing players so you can see how they've developed into the team. But I will just show you the sort of lineups that we're mostly using as well to give you an idea of what the team looks like. I'll just do a quick pick here. Obviously this is not really that relevant, but mostly it's been Durin through the middle, Ingram in there with Baumeister here, Silva mostly operating on the left with Velázquez and Yamin in the midfield, Dala at right back, Montiel and Patrice in there with usually Andrea Sogos, but he's picked up an injury as well, with Diego Romero coming in there too. Lots of other rotation options, of course, with Bigmanovic doing his business, Romero doing well, Nunez as an option for Ingram. But just as an example, this is the progress that we're looking at with Thomas Velázquez over the course of the save, because he's been at the club now for a long time. I mean, it's quite good, isn't it? Like, physically, he's actually not even developed that much, other than his strength going up. Technically, he's done fantastically well, particularly the penalty taking, oddly. His mentals as well, just gone absolutely through the roof, like up 7 in flair. Not that I really want that from a DM, but he loves a bit of flair, does he? Montiel, for me, is one of the ones that really does show off the incredible development that players can have. He's even got up 5 in crossing, just because he can play as a right back sometimes. His passing's now 15, marking's gone up. Even his tackling has actually gone up by 1. Tackling just doesn't seem to improve most of the time in FM. At all. So the fact that it's gone up at all is kind of crazy. What's this one here? His dribbling's actually weirdly went all the way up to 12 and has progressed all the way back down to 9 again, which is kind of surprising, actually, that he just... I guess it's because he's played more as a centre-back. Bobby is another who's just been so good. I mean, he's getting everything in his... even his tackling has gone up. Weirdly, his determination has dropped slightly, as does his teamwork, interestingly. But for the most part, physicals have improved slightly, but he's just been so damn good at just hitting the temp poles of everything we want. And this is with the old school training schedules that we've been using. We're now using EBFM's ones, and we're curious to see how that's going to affect the players over the next few years. These guys won't see much out of that, as they're the older set, but the new guys coming through, very curious to see how those guys actually do in that. Another example would be someone like Patrice. Again, the mental gain is ridiculous. His physicals have improved tremendously as well. And another player that's been here for a long time is Darlan. Now, obviously, he's been mostly operating as a left back or right back in this period, but like, again, his marking, his passing has gone up horrendous, like gone up +6. His off the ball has been phenomenal. His crossing's gone up, dribbling's gone up a decent amount as well. He's just been an absolutely sensational player. That passing, though, has really been stepping it up. I can't believe how good his passing's got. And remember, he was a free transfer from an Angolan side on an amateur contract that we signed for, when was that? 15 years ago now. And he's been an absolute stalwart of this team pretty much ever since, and he will definitely finish his career here. But yeah, that's a little update on how those sort of things are going. Now to the loan farm, which is now at negative 106. It was actually 105 at one point, which I believe puts us at around 150 players out on loan. It's gone up a bit more this year, and with good reason, because, well, top goal scorer out on loan this year is Haris Živković. 43 goals in 41 games for Haladáš. What a guy. Lara in the second tier with 38 as well. But, like, look at some of the quality that exists. The top 3 players on current ability that are out on loan all play for Haladáš, and 4 of the top 5. Ferencváros have got one as well. They've got another one here as well. Cardoso's doing fantastically well. Debrecen, look at some of the players that we've got out on loan. It's actually ridiculous. Barteczko, in addition to that as well, just insanely talented Polish centre-back / full-back as well that plays for Giamot. They're one to watch out for in future years. Because when you look at the potential side of things, you'll note that Honvéd have a decent amount of these guys, as do Kecskemét. I feel like the next few teams that might make an impact on the European scene, if they could get there, Honvéd, Kecskemét, and I'm sorry I'm screwing the names up slightly, and Giamot as well. They've got some quality players, especially Carlos Molina. And when you look at the progress bars on a lot of these guys too, and look at this, Omar Ben Salah is now a 4.5-star talent too. He's still only 25 years old. These guys are absolutely outrageous. I'm just really hoping that with some of their loans expiring this summer, that we'll be able to get them back out again, and that's always a fear. My biggest hope, though, is that because they're playing in the Champions League, they'll be willing to go back out on loan. The reason Blaž came back this year is because Ferencváros weren't in it, and he didn't want to do that. He wanted to play in the Champions League. Clearly, he was good enough. He's the top scorer in the tournament. Ferencváros sold a guy for like 40 million. It was Serkan Özür, our former player, 53 million to Manchester United. From Ferencváros. I mean, he was only there for 2 seasons. We sold him to them for like 2 million, I think, was it? 4 million, and they moved him on for 48. That's the kind of business that they're doing. Our aim for next year, of course, is to just keep on plugging away. It'll be season 20 of the save, and we're still getting to the good part. I think we're into the good part now, but I think we're really at a level where all of a sudden they'll have even more money because they'll be in the Champions League group stages. They'll be able to attract higher quality players, and we can really start to build those teams that are going to make an impact in Europe. We've seen guys get to the second round before, sometimes even further than that. I think that can really start to happen more over the next few years. I can't see us dropping out of the top 5 for the rest of this save, or the top 4 for the rest of this save. But 5 is kind of the same thing this time around anyway. So I think that's really what's key. And it's just about how can we establish ourselves and really build from there. And I still think there's a lot more Champions Leagues to come for us as well. So if you have enjoyed this video, drop a like, that'd be lovely. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. Streaming on Twitch right now, doing the 2 European finals. So join us over there after that as well. Lots more videos coming up very soon. Thank you for joining me. Hold your gun. Capybara. Bye-bye.